Today, Rinpoche continued his discussion on the special insights section of Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, considered one of the most difficult sections of this text or any text written in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. The point of the lack of intrinsic existence of phenomena which does not negate existence is a major emphasis of this teaching.
Mm-hmm. So welcome to the Chenrezig Tibetan Buddhist Center. We are going to begin on page 135 in the English, for those of you who are following along. And if just to begin, if we were to summarize all of Lord Buddha's teachings, we could do so by putting them into three separate categories. And these are called the teachings for beings of three capacities, and they lead to three specific results. So the first category are the teachings that are called the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity, and these practices are for beings who wish to achieve rebirth in the higher realms of cyclic existence. And this practitioner engages in going for refuge to the three jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and then engages in ethics which abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities. By doing these practices, he or she will be able to achieve rebirth in the higher realms, and these are called the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity. The next category is called the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity. This category of teachings is for those beings who wish to achieve complete nirvana or an individual liberation. This practitioner engages in what's called the three highest higher trainings: the highest higher training in ethics, highest higher training in concentration, and the highest higher training in wisdom. In dependence upon these three highest higher trainings, this practitioner of medium capacity is able to achieve his or her own individual nirvana or liberation. Then the last category of teachings are the teachings for beings of great capacity, and these teachings lead to complete Buddhahood. This practitioner engages in the practices previously mentioned and couples them with the generation of the mind that aspires to enlightenment, bodhicitta, and then from that generation engages in the practice of the six perfections. And through dependence upon these practices, he or she is able to achieve complete Buddhahood. So this is how we would summarize the Lord Buddha's teachings into three categories. Decent. When Shula, Konde Tanji Jeta, Konde Tanji Ralu, Jeta Yinyana, Wabu Tanji Rajiji, Tomba, Nido Mayune, Jujin Latene, Joyu, Jusenje, Terem Hade, Techebala, Techeba Jushro, Techeba Jush, Tatana, Tala, Teni. Tatana, Tala, Tende Tela, Tetena, Dungeta, Dungea, Tede, Jujin Latene, Juala, Dungeja Guiji, Tene, Shuala, Dunge, Tene, Majuala, Dunge Maru Shiro. Dunge Yuna, Tekanle, Shonyu, Jukunju, Dungente, Gabi, Gobatan, Tedribi, Lantebe, Denje Yuto, Denje Yuna, Seda Shebadan, Ponwadan, Ngodo, Shebadan, Gombaya Ronla, Teda Yuna, Ganchu Son La Soba, Tanji Rongo, Tataya Cesele, Kala, Ngobo, Tanji Rajiji Tomba, Ni, the Ronga, Tela, Cheki Member, Tada Tanji Ronga Juro, Cetera. Cetera Dushena.
Geshe Lharampa ne Tenzin Tenzin la Tomba Ni che Pade Tisher Kala Tomba Ni Ron de la Tenzin Ron la Kala Tenzin Ron de la Pabi Dembaje na ne Ribanjuro Chetra Shena Geshe Tenzin ni duge ni du juje Tenzin me ne maino tene raji mebe tomba juro duge yena ne duge kunju da duge goba da Dogen Goba Rui La Ron Anjuro. Tisher ne Dogen Yunsu Sheba Dan, Kunjo Ponga Dan, Goba Ngoto Shawa Dan, La Gomba Yang Rongo. Dogen La Soba, Demba Yunsu Sheba La Soba, Yena ne Debu Tanji Ron Anjuro. Debu na Yena ne Debu La Temba Ta Rongo. Debu la neba ta yena ne shuba ta rongwa juro. Ne debu la neba ta shuba ta yena ne gendu rongwa. Pabi neba na yena ne tambi chu jang rongwa juro. Tambi chu jang gendu yena ne Sanjay jang rongwa juro. Tisher Kunju Songlaya rongwa juro. Jiten Badang, Jiten Lendebi, Ngwa Tanji Chebrado, Toba Tanji Rongla, Chu Mayimba, Tadang, Ti Debudang, Jiten Lendebi, Tanyi Dajang, Rongwa juro. Tisher Tatana, Kala Tomba Ni Rongwa, Tela Tanji Rongwa juro. Kala Toni Rongwa, Tela Tenzin Deban Jongwa, Ni Mebe, Tanji Rongwa juro. She Sombe, Rongwa ne, Teta Yueba Tanga, Meba la Koa Shawo. Khantambi, Tundu ki deba ti len toan, Ranji meba la, Shaji tebe, Len Lubin ji sewan zete, Tundu le, Ngona tenen juan kan, Ten tomba ni ji sha dan, Kan la tenen, Juan de Ranji meni imba ma. She Zonji ti rande le jan cheji tomba cheji tomba naji tomba ni konto ma chuba cheji ti ranji meba yimbi sher ngoba naji ranji goba metedo tela lenga tsuwa mawa shede Dene Ngwa Tanji Dene Nyungwa Kanyiwa Dene Tomba Nido Ji Shir Shena Ne Raji Meba Ni Yimbi Shiro Ngwa Tanji Dene Nyungwa Tenzin Debar Nyungwa Dada Ne Raji Dan Jiba Mayi De Raji Mebi Shiro Ji Shir Shena Judan Jenla Tuba Na Jibi Shiro Kete ngobo na raji ji yue ne judan jen me jang ne yue ba jua shi na teta yang mayimba ti shir raji me ba yin te na tomba wo shi shawa che do te jin do nga yi che jang ten ne Tenzin Tibetan Jungwa Yinte, Tishir Raji Medo, Raji Meba Ni, Yimbishir Tomba Wo Xie Shawa, Teba Yino, Chitar Bomba Dan, Tambula Suba, Tenen Jungwa Ni, Yimbishir Raji Tomba Ni, Raji Tomba Ni, Yin Zhangzi Dan, Chu Dan, Wusu Zinba Dan, Lenba Dan, Changwa Dan, Long Dan, Nyema Dan, Yongsu, Juba, Nuba Tejin Do, Ngayi Sijang, Tenzin, Tibetan Jungwa, Yinba, Nuba Yinbe, Tela Chu Ji, Ci Rangji Meba Ni, Yinbe Shiro, Ngabu Tangji Rangji, Guba, Tangji Teba, Yino, Xie Xie Meba Ganyinba Tene, Merungo, Xie Rangji Ji, Chuna, Jujin La Matuba Dan, Jujin La Tuna, Rangji Meba Chabi Khonsu, Jesu, Rudu Dan, Rangji Mebi Tsigi, Gadu Ji Shaji Nuba, Shinto, Sewa Sonso, Jujin La Tene, Gune, Nyumoba Dan, Nabra Shangyu, Chu Chewa Dan, Gabi Tende Dan, Rangji Meba Ni, Jitundu, Doa, Tachime Te, Tendayi Tende, Ni Rangji Meba, Tubi, Jutsen Lana Meba, Doa Dene, Keba Omabo Koni, Chichusu Sheba Shayi, Tene Chewa Dan, Tene, Jaba La, Rangi Ngoyu Tubi, Cheba Zone, Rangi Ngubi, Ribe, Chewa Dan, Gaba, Tende Gana, La Dudu Boba, Tar June, Omi, Chetajin, Niebi, Ge Chenmo Jua Yino.
Okay, you know. The datayin. Okay, you know. 590. Okay. All right, so again, we're on page 135. It's chapter 11 in the English, but it's not even a new paragraph in the text in the Tibetan. So it's just, so it's chapter 11 in the English, page 135. How is it that all cyclic existence in nirvana is possible in a system that asserts emptiness? As I will explain below, proponents of the view that all things are empty of intrinsic existence argue that this is possible by reason of things arising in dependence on causes and conditions. This being the case, dependent arising is tenable within emptiness of intrinsic existence, and when dependent arising is tenable, suffering is also tenable. For suffering may be attributed only to what arises in dependence on causes and conditions. It cannot be attributed to what does not arise dependently. When true suffering exists, when the true origin for which it arises, the cessation, that is, the stopping of that suffering, and the paths leading to those cessations are tenable. Thus all four truths exist. When the four truths exist, then it is possible to understand, to eliminate, and to actualize the first three truths respectively, and it is possible to cultivate true paths, then such practices exist. Then everything, the three jewels and so forth, is tenable. As Chandrakirti's clear word says, for those to whom this emptiness of intrinsic existence of all things makes sense, everything that has been mentioned also makes sense. Why? Because we call dependent arising emptiness. Thus, dependent arising makes sense in a system in which emptiness makes sense. And the Four Noble Truths are reasonable for those to whom dependent arising makes sense. Why? Because only that which arises dependently can be suffering, nor what does not arise dependently can be suffering, nor what does not arise dependently. Since what arises dependently lacks intrinsic nature, it is empty. Once there is suffering, then the origins of suffering, the cessations of suffering, and the paths leading to the cessations of suffering also make sense. Therefore, through understanding of suffering, elimination of origins, actualization of cessation, cultivation of paths also makes sense. When there is thorough understanding, etc., of the truth, suffering, etc., then it makes sense that there will be spiritual results. Once there are results, then it makes sense that there are people who have achieved those results. This in turn implies the possibility of people who are approaching those results. Once there are those people who are approaching and achieving those results, then the community is possible. Community meaning Sangha. When the noble truths exist, then sublime teaching also makes sense. And when the sublime teaching and community exists, then the Buddhas are possible as well. Therefore, the three jewels also make sense. All profound knowledge of everything mundane and supramundane makes sense. Proper and improper conduct, the results of that, happy and miserable rebirths, and all worldly conventions make sense as well. Therefore, in that way, Nagarjuna says, for those to whom emptiness makes sense, everything makes sense. If emptiness does not make sense, then dependent arising would not exist, and so nothing would make sense. Therefore, you should understand that what makes sense and what does not make sense here refer to whether those things exist. As cited earlier, an objection by essentialists appears in Nagarjuna's refutation of objections. If all things are completely without intrinsic nature, then your words also lack intrinsic nature, and thus cannot refute intrinsic existence. The Master Nagarjuna clearly answers that functionality is tenable within the context of the absence of intrinsic existence, the refutation of objections. We propound that the dependent arising of things is called emptiness. That which arises dependently has no intrinsic nature. Also, Nagarjuna's own commentary on the refutation of objections here says, failing to comprehend the emptiness of things, you essentialists look for something to criticize and argue against the Madhyamaka, saying, your words lack intrinsic nature and therefore cannot refute the intrinsic existence of things. Here in Madhyamaka, the dependent arising of things is emptiness. Why? Because they lack intrinsic nature. Those things that arise dependently are not associated with intrinsic nature because they lack intrinsic nature. Why? Because they rely on causes and conditions. If things had intrinsic nature, then they would exist even without causes and conditions. Since such is not the case, they lack intrinsic nature. Therefore, we speak of them as empty. Similarly, my words are also dependent arisings, and therefore are without intrinsic nature. Because they lack intrinsic nature, it is reasonable to say they are empty. Because things such as pots and cloth are dependent arisings, they are empty of intrinsic nature. Yet a pot can receive and hold honey, water, and soup. A cloth can protect one from the cold, wind, and sun. And so it is with my words, because they are dependent arisings, they lack intrinsic nature, yet they are fully capable of establishing that things lack intrinsic existence. Therefore, it is inappropriate for you to give the argument, because your words lack intrinsic nature, it is not tenable that they refute the intrinsic existence of all things. Thus, Nagarjuna speaks very clearly about the pervasion that whatever relies on causes and conditions lacks intrinsic nature, and the counter-pervasion that whatever has intrinsic nature does not rely on causes and conditions. He very clearly says that words without intrinsic nature can carry out refutations and proofs. It is even necessary to point out that dependent arising, the production and cessation of afflicted and pure phenomena, in dependence on causes and conditions, is located right together with the absence of intrinsic existence. Dependent arising is the best reason to use in order to know the absence of intrinsic existence. You should be aware that only the Madhyamaka experts have this unique approach. If you hold that dependent production and dependent cessation would have to be essentially existent, and you use the arguments against intrinsic existence to refute the dependent arisings of production and cessation, then those arguments, like a god transformed into a demon, will be a tremendous obstacle to finding an accurate understanding of the Madhyamaka. And here it says, you should be aware that only the Madhyamaka experts have this unique approach. This word expert implies the Prasangika school, the highest of the Madhyamaka schools, the consequentialists. Diksong Rinpoche.
Tadana chu na la rangi ngoyo tubi rangi du tanya me be ngeba tamba na junde jewa la ranlo je ngeba transa me ba Jengo Sula, Che Gushin, Jundela Ranluji Neba, Leba, Tamba Na, Raji Mebala, Ranluji Neba, Transa Meba, Sonne, Raji Mebala, Gomba, Raji Mebala, Gomba, Lemba, Kishine, Tadun, Omaba, Omi Tawa Manye Par, Sheba Jela, Tawa Nyebi, Jur Kilambi, Chutin Tabar Sonwashi, Jejane, Tsu Sabatan, Diba Jonyu, Gutuman Bebatan, Kebala Tene, Tubatan, Sambala Tumba Shao, Tendai Natula, Nebadeba, Ni Tute, Seta Tantu Sonyu, Omi Tawa Shinto Nye Kawala, Gone, Taji Raji Jibale, Raji Nyejibale, Teshi Shambi Chun Deyi, Tindu Kawa Chenjune, and Tubi Tun Chudunle, and Rodo, Loba Chuba Yin, Shedan, Rejen Tewan Lejan, Reji Lunde, Mazani, and Rajin, Ngozun, Shula, Tadu Nawa, Gangi Tse, Senla Neba Mayimba, Tse Tanju, Nemeba, Taro Ngozun Mayimba, Ne Samu, Tego, Chetabo, Senla Dela, Jobanjoro, Chude Saji, Chui, Ne Sheba Kawa, Tu Jude, Dena Toba Sanje ne Chudenba Le, Loba Joro She, Tenju Dan Soro Na Ne, Shinto Tuba Kawa, Somba Yino, Tata Mayin Bar, Jonsen Ka Jine, Bombala Soba Ranki, en La Dan, Chitade, Jubi, Ribi, Ranji Meba, Tenla Beba, Sombi, Tenla Trune, Bombala Soba Na, Chutan Dembala Soba, Rangi La Kanyi, Jeba Na, Tata Kandoyan, Manye Pa Na, Bomba Mandu Ko Nyado, Nebandela. Tena Joken La Yang, Tata Jebe, Joken Yang, Mandu Ko Nyado, Nebanjoro. Tise, Joken Menye Na, Ne Bomba La Suba Mendo. Nyado Sushiki, She Nyane. Yueba Mayimba Meba Yang, Mayin She Sawa Tarji, Riba Tana, and Re, Neba Shinji Ludo, Tambala, Tawanyeba Junane, the Lashu Chitu, Rongo. Tisher Ludo Nebataki, Nedunji, Sonro Tanti, Gundeji, Tenju Omi, Jun Nabar Taba, Nane, Tony Jitun, Tendi Jitun do, Somba, Keba Omabe Chichu Chebar Jendo, Sumen Sanji Janda, Paden Dawata Be, Papa Yosiji, Uma Lama Maluba, Chayune, Tendi La Tene, Raji Mebalang, but Telo Dan Raji Tombi, Mobana, Jundeso, Chatula, Yenji, Tuamanubi, Nabatamba Shao. Niba Lute,
Chishina de Ditsko, then Injike.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so in that case is where we are, right? In that case, page 138. in that case, when you develop a sense of certainty that phenomena lack even a particle of essential or intrinsic nature, you will then have no basis for developing certain knowledge of the relationship between cause and effect within your own system. You will have to posit those as others see them, etc. Or if you do develop a sense of certainty about cause and effect within your own system, then it will be impossible for your system to foster certain knowledge of the absence of intrinsic existence. You will have to find some other way to construe what the Buddha meant in speaking of the absence of intrinsic existence. If this is the case, then you must understand that you have not yet found the Madhyamaka view. What will help you find the right view? As a basis, you should be pure in upholding your ethical commitments. Then strive in many ways to accumulate the collections of merit and wisdom and clear away obscurations. Rely on the learned, making efforts to study and to reflect upon their instructions. Since certainty about appearances and certainty about emptiness almost never develop together, it is extremely difficult to find the Madhyamaka view. This is what Nagarjuna meant in the 24th chapter of the Fundamental Treatise. Therefore, knowing that those of limited intelligence would have difficulty understanding the depths of his teaching, the mind of the sage turned away from giving this teaching. Nagarjuna's Precious Garland says, "When the impurity of this body, which is coarse, directly observable, and continuously appearing, does not stay with the mind, then how could the excellent teaching, which has no basis, is not immediately apparent, and is most subtle and profound, easily come to mind?" Realizing that because of its profundity, this teaching is difficult to understand, the sage, when he became a Buddha, turned away from giving this teaching. Thus, treatises and scriptures state that it is very difficult to understand the profound view. Failing to reach such knowledge of both appearances and emptiness makes some mistake the meaning of statements in certain authoritative texts that demonstrate the absence of intrinsic existence via rational analysis of whether pots and such are one with or different from their parts. Analyzing whether something such as a pot is any of its parts, such as its lip or neck, they do not find it to be any of those. This leads them to a sense of certainty that there is no pot here. Then, applying the same analysis to the analyzer, they become certain that there is no analyzer here. They then wonder if the analyzer is not to be found, then who is it that knows the pots and such do not exist? So they say things are neither existent nor non-existent. If the false certainty brought on by this sort of counterfeit reasoning were considered a case of finding the Madhyamaka view, then gaining that view would seem to be the easiest thing in the world. Therefore, the intelligent should develop an unshakable certainty that the very meaning of emptiness is dependent arising. This is what is said in the definitive scriptures and is pure and in the pure Madhyamaka texts, the treatises that comment on the intended meaning of those definitive scriptures. This is the distinguishing feature of the Madhyamika experts. Maybe it's Madhyamika and Madhyamaka. Specifically, this is the subtle point that the noble Nagarjuna and his spiritual son Aryadeva had in mind, upon which the master Buddhapalita and the glorious Chandrakirti gave fully comprehensive commentary. This is how dependent arising bestows a certain knowledge of the absence of intrinsic existence. This is how it dawns on you that it is things which are devoid of intrinsic existence that are causes and effects. Dikso, Rinpoche Nipa.
Nipa lo de jetar kapi chu ne, jetar ngom ludu je lo, chu na la rangi ngoyo truba, ngoyo trubi rangi du zang meba zang, rangi je tru na, konde je na ja tang je sha meba, na ja de sha morong yu, jindru la soba. Na jindru la subi, na ja tang je jubi ngeba, rangi meba, ke lang go ba la, chija ngobo na la, rangi ngoyo jubi rangi me na, ne jen ji shi yu, te na jindru zang, Nyomobe, Ledo Nyomobe, Koale, Chimba, Tony to be Sheraga touch, Koale, Triola Soba, Tanji, Jenga So, Gobala, Tonatamba, Soji, Cheba Jumugoba, Rajin Gobe, Rebe, Goba Yino, Shemhanane, Rajin Mebala, Chindu Dan, Nyonji So, Jabe, Choba Chetar Magaba, Sonshis, Kete, Lumenji Jebane, Chindu So, Kundeji, Kundetanji, Jane, Kundetanji Jinaja, and Tanya Do, Yela, Kujan, Tanya Do, Tada, Debe, Jume Do, Nyana, Tene, Reba Mayite, Dada, Lumen Dayu, Jebane, Tanya Do, Chuna Rajila, Rangi, Mudubi, Raji Meba, Imba, Chejan, Tadana, Rajin Gobi Rebe, Tanya Do, Rajin Goba, Goba dance. That never do a gaba the church in what the truth message you modest. Never mess love church do and truth message losuna and chetal on the grace. What is one is that Goba Rajin Gobi Rebe, Chenru Su Chang, Goba, Rajin Chuna never do a Gobi Reba dege. And then Chutajin Goba is a lodge Mores, and then Goba Ina, Chetalongres, Trene Goba Debi Sher, Tanya Don, Chenru Kaba, Shinto Celos, Kaji de Water, the Lord Gundusa, Dona, Rajin Mabatan, Chenru, Chengasu Gaba Dona, Gawan Dona. Rajin tomba la, Konde Naja Tanji Teba, Deba Ni Kantoyan, Nemoroyu, Omabi, Chechu Jibu Deni, Kaba Ino, Tada Gawa Mandana, Rajin Gubi Rebe, Gajala Cheba Jian, and Jamagoba, Chengadan, Chendusu, Goba, Dola, Jusen Yataba, Jam Medo, Tena, Rajin Gobi, Rebe, Jundi Gonane, Rajin Mabala, and Jonji Su Moroyu, Moro and Deba Yimbe, Tatana, Kedin the Guntona, Joame Jiba me. Pabi Deba Jibano, Chelam, Tawajuro Shesu, Raji, Nijibane, and Mumai, Tuba, Gobadan, Kedu Mobo, Tanji, Raji Gula Yemina, Church Sijan Rajime, Raji Duba, Menuso, she. Zundu ne ngobo mayu chaba goba tang chaba jiang meba shinto sewa yino kete rangshi ji tomo ni ka la yonji so moro la koja rangshi ji tomo ka to yang kemelebe cheme to nyata Yeba mai meba mai so what the ladies Cheme to nyana then jungi tondo tem ronde deba chesele kojala jonji so mateba cheme ba maze deba je la so teba yino shi rojin Zawayang Raji Ji, Dombi Shula Dada Maroma Da, Madun Shula, ne matun shula moronwa leba shene sewa sombi shedan oman juba lejan ne ngobu tomba zunye la soba sula tene madaba yame cheta tene zunye su ton le ne ngaba tene naba jinju tar tejin ngobu naji ton na ya tonye tale rodo chewan joro she sombi shero jen ha chinju so teba ngona tanto gaba shawa maroyu kunzu to gagola te tse tanye to ya ne konde ji naja tanje goba tenda yi oma ba tene me ba shi gos the college you know
The Abbot. Okay. B. How these systems contradict this distinguishing feature of Madhyamaka. Thus, the system of Nagarjuna the Protector is that phenomena do not have even a particle of essential or intrinsic nature. Also, if there were intrinsic existence, then all of the teachings on cyclic existence and nirvana would be impossible. Since it is inappropriate not to give those teachings, all the teachings on bondage, freedom, etc. should be set forth. Thus, you definitely must assert the absence of intrinsic existence. However, you misinterpreters of Madhyamaka seem to say, as things have no essential or intrinsic nature, then what else is there? Therefore, it is not necessary to add a qualification such as ultimate when refuting bondage, freedom, production, cessation, etc. Bondage, etc. are refuted by the arguments that refute intrinsic existence. If you say this, think about how much you should not contradict that which allows you, in the absence of intrinsic existence, to posit freedom, bondage, freedom arising, disintegration, and so forth. Objection. The Master Chandrakirti holds that teachings on cyclic existence and nirvana, bondage, freedom, etc., are made conventionally, and we also accept these conventionally. Hence, there is no fault. This is not reasonable, for you also accept the Master Chandrakirti's assertion that phenomena have no essential or intrinsic nature, even conventionally. The argument refuting intrinsic existence must refute it even conventionally, and you claim that the argument refuting intrinsic existence also refutes bondage, freedom, and so forth. Therefore, it is quite clear that in your system, bondage, freedom, and so forth are refuted even conventionally. In brief, if you claim that the absence of intrinsic existence contradicts bondage, freedom, production, cessation, etc., then it will be impossible in terms of either truth to give the full and correct teachings on nirvana and cyclic existence within emptiness, the emptiness of intrinsic existence. You must have therefore denied the unique feature of Madhyamaka. If you claim that the absence of intrinsic existence does not contradict bondage and such, and then you are left without any good reason with which to support your claim that, without having to add any qualification such as ultimate to what is negated, the argument refuting intrinsic existence also refutes production, cessation, bondage, freedom, etc. Therefore, if the argument refuting intrinsic existence refutes causes and effect, then you are asserting that production, disintegration, and such are impossible in the absence of intrinsic existence. In that case, it is quite clear that your production does not differ in the slightest from the essentialist argument set forth in the 24th chapter of Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise. If these were all empty, there would be neither arising nor disintegration. It follows that for you, the noble truths would not exist. It follows that for you, the noble truths would not exist. Nor does your position differ at all from the essentialist argument set forth in Nagarjuna's refutation of extremes. If all things are completely without intrinsic nature, then your words also lack intrinsic nature and thus cannot refute intrinsic existence. Objection. production, disintegration, and so forth are possible neither within emptiness of intrinsic existence nor within non-emptiness of intrinsic existence, since we assert neither emptiness of intrinsic existence nor non-emptiness of intrinsic existence. We have no fault. Reply: the reading of the Madhyamaka text is utterly inappropriate, as Chandrakirti's clear words proves. We avoid the fallacy that arising disintegration and such would not be tenable. What is more, the Four Truths, etc., are tenable. Also, Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise makes a clear distinction between the tenability of the Four Noble Truths in the context of emptiness of intrinsic existence and their untenability in the context of non-emptiness. Further, Chandrakirti's commentary on the Middle Way says, empty things such as reflections depend on a collection of causes. It is not as though this were not well known. From those empty reflections and so forth arise consciousness that bear their image. Similarly, even though all things are empty, from those empty things effects are definitely produced. Moreover, when reason refutes bondage, freedom, and so forth, according to your assertion, it is not suitable to refute those ultimately, and thus they must be refuted conventionally. In that case, one would be refuting all teachings on cyclic existence and nirvana even conventionally. Such a Madhyamaka is without precedent. Let's go. Sumba Shera Rimbo, the Triwa Sumba Gutso, Triwa Dan Lenja, Chen San Gari Be. Gang Sen, this Shera Trapodu. The draw? Then Cheran San Gari Be.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's draw. We're going to do a little bit more. Its material is very difficult, and Rinpoche said that, we'll just do a little more and then we'll do questions. He was going to stop there and said, let's just do a little more.
Oma yu par panju chun chola pamba yinbe du ne chun pamba jeba yinbe sashi raji jeba le neje bale kedi chöji kedi rangi chun ne tala ngaba shen do tala ngaba shen do tani jeba chuba jin kede ngona rajin le somba jeso tashena tata nina ngobu junde meba chotao shedan kede dada dogun madona joa meji jeba me pabi deba jeba na chola meba tawan joro shesu je sonso tena rangi ngoyo tubi rajin mena yen jishi yuji hawande ne döme zawa nyogo la sube rangin meba dan nyogo meba ni cheba mashiba sela tishir nyogo yueba dan nyogo rangi ngoyo yueba ni jang ne mashibe yuena rangi ngoyo yueba dan rangi ngoyo tuba meba mebe doba sede tata maina rangi ngoyo toba gobe rebe yue tan chewa tan gaba ja zan la soba chi shir goba ma tata jese nyogo la soba yueba doba tese to rangi ngoyo yueba doba mhala rangi ngoyo toba mena teme do mawa niso hongwa doma zawa ngobo mayu kolo dan cheme ba yinte jejabe deba le ngobo yueba mayu chetana tese to ngobo ti yueba ni imba tesi do rangi ngoyo ya yoba yinla te che rangi ngoyo da ngoyo da trawa te che tela ngoba tana meba tangje du mebi shir ne bombi radan rayu ni so mawa le mande bi shir dene ngoba de ba tangje ndi kawa joro she sawa sumbi shiro rajin yume dan yume jibo de baden da watabi shiwa de matuba shenji de mazawa tani so hongyu tani omayen omi matuba yinde dada rangi ngoyo tuba yeme do na sonwa na chu de yeme do roa dada na rajin ji tomba la ne jundi jasa ten meba ne chebi tatong la yang chu de yoba de shenji rangi ngoyo tuba doba juyu teta na jundi rangi me jindo teta na yu juma tabo shasa mong yu tabi tatongwa yino teta na te na chu tangji rangi ngoyo tuba du tanya juma ne meba tobi yota mutongwa yinla teta na nyogula subi ngobu na tenji nebi tongbi ngobu nido monruwa rang ki shaji la toyo ba ngeba ngashi chona mebi tat pongwa yino rangji meba dan meba ni sewa je la tsise le jang 장송 때 제게도 제대 대달 최지 뭐보다 세상에 매봐 나버잖아 오나 땡주래 오나 존된데 라기 셰비 레지 나바 매바네 라니 제 뇨안 조아 이노 셰소마 탄지 추데 세와줄라 레다 데블라 코바타 비셔 네 최매바 매바유 조조바 이노 줘바샤데 네 코자 매바 마이데 코자네 여바다 매바니 가네 니소 매비 네 라냐가 렌데베 종체도 로아 사와시바 이노 코자네 레셰바보나 데베뇽아보 메도시 파와 마이데 원나 제세나 dada rajin chi me to she nabar goba yino rajin che de rajin me ba na la shaji tan chi me te ba chi shir nye ba nye ba sunju ki duba ni do nya ne te yang yoba ma yin te rajin dan che ba nam खाना मातो शर तहा राजी मैं बाला तो कोना नीला तो कोना ला शावा तो शर शेसों बिशर तला राजी मैं बाइना राजी गुबा तहा तले ते लेना ने नामी जोआ ने सवा जोरो शे ngabo mai pheba ne rajin gubi ribe junde kaba doba da doba cheba me ba son o junde kana cheta yu tu joro sheba ne oma ba dang ngobu ma ni je ne deba daya oma ba ne junde ka ba mendo la ngoma yu rajin go na junde jang go nya ne oma ba la me ba ba cheta ma se wa yin no chojo oma ba la kecho pecho ne rajin go na rebe rajin go na rebe te junde jang ga go ba de junde ga go ba de oma ngoma wa na je ngoma wa na da tue ba na la wen jang junde rebe go ba oma be lo su she ne tla me ba na wo zo ba ti ne to ko ja ne me ba ma yi de yuan ni su ma wa se ne yuan me ni su ma wa se ne tabi no se ba she ba yin no she su ne yuan me do ma wa se ju Lama ten to tala ko ja ne lende su me to she mama she be me ba ma se wa yin de ne lende su me ba de na me ba jo wa le ko ja ne tata me de je ba wo na Chenmo she jeba la lende su da rajin me to she juba doba yin no she me ba ne yoba me ba sewa yin no rajin me ba la shaji me te be nye ba suna logo nyabi chwe je me ba mama ye rāngshī mē bā mā wō shē pē jāng kā gui bī juñ tē rāngshī mē nā juñ tē mē tē bā tā nū bō mē nū shē ngā bō mā yu tsē bā yī tē kō rāng lū lā rāngshī mē bā tāng mē bā chē bā tē tā tsē bā wō tē yī nā tō juñ tē junde bu je ba la so xia ji tang ji ran jin yue ba la mo rong yu ran jin me ba kun na la da da rong song so yi ja bin de ba le jang ne da nu ngo bo me ba ma ma yi de den jin de ban zhong wa pa wa yin bi xie ro chue ji ngo bo pa wa xi xie gang xie na ma yi de den jin de ban zhong wa ma yin bi xie ro chue jin ma wa xi jin na den jin de ban zhong wa ma wo yang den jin de ban zhong yu dun de gang ji jin na rang jin me bi dun de rang jin jin ma ji bi dun dang ju ma dang mi ju dang zu nian la su bi zhi zi zhong jie dang zhi ba dang ma lang dang cong bi rang jin ji de ban zhong wa de zhong yu dun dang dong ba ni dang da me bi dun nong xie den de du de ba ngo bu yu me ji ta ni su ma wa se zu den du de yang den jin de ban zhong yu dun rang jin ji jie ba la xie be ne ngo bu ma wa se la ju ma la su bi ju ma su ba dang da yu de ban zhong wa den de ji dun du den be ne ngo bu ma wa se wa yin no de na ngo bu rang jin la xie ba dang dun jin ne ba la xie ba ni le ngo bu yu ba ma yu ngo bu ne rang jin ji Trubala, Konala Shela, Ngobo Meba, Pai Ngobo Ne, Raji, Ngobo Tuenshibi, Ngobo La Shayi, Ngobo La Shate, Tenin Sena, Raji Kabi, Kajin, Jumatabi Jundi, Yuba, Tembi Shiro, Yen, Jabin Debale, Yen, Jabin Debale, Yan, Debi Yuji, Temba, Medo Nyaba, Tekido Mana, Kojana, Tenjin Debanjun Sawa, Mahino, Techetara Yuba, Cheta Neshena, Neba, Neshi Shaluba Yin, Temba Shisha Luba Yin, Tunla Luba, Konajun, She Lubin Yin Nabar, Juba Zedo, Tisher, Tembi Mibane, Debi Ngobo, Yino, Kete Ranki, Nguyutuna, Senda Ti Temba, Te Yuba, Yubi Tunla, maybe Sherry Ranki Nguyutuba Shin Na, Kangi Sendebi Ngobo, Raji Meba, Titse, Tela, maybe Temba, Raji Meba Yinte Tisher, Ne Luba Yino She Shawa, Trobo, Ne Luba She Shawa Ne, Raji Meba Dan, Tenjin Debajun, Juan Sheba Dan, Tun Jela, Mahimba, Ngobo Mebi Tun La, and Lubi Tun Mahino, Debi Ngobo Tanjido, Meba Mahite, Temba Shawa Yimbi Shetan, Tisher Devo, Ton Shiro, Rangi, Yuba Mahite, and Tabani to Tai Shetan, Ngobo Zibi Tai Shiro, Ngobo Zimber Tai Shir, She Debala Subi, Dada, Hime Jan, Mila Subi, Nguyutuba, Truba Mila, Luba, Jubi, Tendeji, Yije, and the Ngobo Mebi, Meba Sombe, Chundana, Ragan, Nguyutuba, Dena, Ngobo Ma, Yuba, Tatung, Tonga Yije, Tada, Yuba Tando, Mawane, Ngobo Ma, Yuba Ma, Meba Mahino, Pa Mino, Ti Shinaki, Ngobo Na, Tuenshibi, Tubi, Tomba Ngumeto, Dena, Ngobo Meba Mawa, Meta Tonga Yije, Tadala Raji Meba, Pembe, Meta Tonga, Mino, Tata Yi Meba Dan, Raji Meba Dan, Ranki Nguyutuba Dan, Yuba Dan, Che Mashiba, Yume Tatonga, Goba, Koja Meba, Mamayi, Yuba Mai, Shesaro, Yuba Mai, Meba Mai, Yumi Memi Tawase, what the lady said, Yuba Mai, Meba Mai. Shema Tala, Rayune, Gendu Shada Mai, Oma Bayan, Jonze Jan, Mishudo, Jenla Gaba Shebi, Jela Gaba Shebi, Ranki, Yume, Tani La Soba, Tabashene, Gobe, Teni So, Katan Chuk Gobe, Teni La, Kelamba Nido, Teni Kaya, maybe, Turn Debi Shiro, Detar, Ji Kaya, Roma Shila Raji, Yume, Che Taba Shebe, Tenzin so Khazan Choba, Doba Yinte, Temandubi, Khensur Rajin, Yoba Dan, Mebani, Dabashawa, Maronte, Pena, Kadu de Yona, Hombala Sobi, Sibala Soba, So, Jin Drawatan Drawosa.
Didi so.
Yeah. Tungajaga.
Then Chiwad.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And 99. And that's right then. Yes. Limiting. Okay. And which does anyone remember where I left off?
41C.
41?
141C.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I knew it went on. And one thing Rinpoche mentioned in the midst of reading here, where it says, if you say this, think about how you should not contradict that which allows you in the absence of intrinsic existence to posit bondage, freedom arising, disintegration, and so forth. It's important here to be able to posit that these things exist while still not intrinsically existing. So one needs to be able to posit that these things conventionally do have function in terms of bondage, freedom arising, disintegration, and so forth, yet they do not have an intrinsic nature. But falling to the idea that they don't exist is a nihilistic view, and that's the view that you're trying to avoid. So Rinpoche mentioned that at that point, and I forgot to mention it, so there we are. C. How a Madhyamikan responds to those who negate the distinguishing feature of Madhyamaka. To the objection, if things were empty of intrinsic existence, the causes and effects of a cyclic existence in nirvana could not be set forth. Nagarjuna in Protector responds that since the fallacy that Madhyamikas were going to adduce has been advanced against them, they will turn it around and use it against the objectors. The 24th chapter of Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise says, "You take your own fallacies and turn them into ours, like someone who, while riding on a horse, forgets that very horse. If you regard things as existing intrinsically, then you regard all things as having no causes or conditions. If all these phenomena were not empty, there would be neither arising nor disintegration. It would follow that for you essentialists, the Four Noble Truths would not exist. And there are other such passages. Therefore, it is clear that those who argue if there is no essential or intrinsic existence, then what else is there? Have unquestionably failed to distinguish between a seedling's lack of intrinsic existence and a seedling's lack of existence. Because of that, they have also failed to distinguish between the existence of a seedling and the existence of a seedling by way of its own essence. Therefore, they clearly hold that whatever exists must exist essentially, and if something is not essentially existent, then it does not exist. Otherwise, why would they claim that the arguments refuting essential existence refute mere existence and mere production and cessation, etc.? They claim that insofar as seedlings and such are asserted to exist, they must exist essentially, and they claim that if seedlings utterly lack essential existence, they must be utterly non-existent. In taking these positions, they undeniably fall to both extremes of permanence and annihilation. Thus, their perspective is no different from that of the essentialists. For Chandrakirti's commentary on Aryadeva's 400 stanzas, the Bodhisattva Yogacara Kadusataka says clearly, the essentialists say that whenever things exist, there is essence, and they see it. Without essence, these things would be completely non-existent, like the horn of a donkey. Therefore, these essentialists can avoid being proponents of both extremes of permanence and annihilation. Consequently, it is difficult to reconcile all of their explicit assertions. So it's once you start to take apart the assertions of essentialists, you find that they don't hold up. The glorious Chandrakirti distinguishes intrinsic existence from existence. He also distinguishes the absence of intrinsic existence from non-existence. Unless you know this, you will no doubt fall to both extremes, unless you will not know the meaning of the middle way, which is without extremes. For when it turns out that a phenomena utterly lacks essential existence, for it will be utterly non-existent. Then, since there will be no way at all to posit cause and effect within emptiness, emptiness of intrinsic existence, you will fall to an extreme of annihilation. Once you accept that a phenomenon exists, you have to assert that it essentially exists. In that case, it will be impossible for you to treat cause and effect as similar to illusions in the sense that they appear to exist intrinsically, whereas they do not. Consequently, you will fall to the extreme of permanence, or of substantialism. Therefore, to avoid falling to the extreme of existence, you must realize that from the outset of all phenomena lack even a particle of essential existence. And to escape the extreme of non-existence, you must develop a certain definite knowledge that things such as seedlings nevertheless have the power to perform their own functions. That is, they do not turn into non-things which are empty of capacity to perform functions. A clear differentiation between the absence of intrinsic existence and non-existence is set forth in Chandrakirti's clear words. Give me just 1 second here. Objection. The claim that things lack intrinsic existence will wipe out everything the Bhagavan said, such as you experience the fruition of the karma that you yourself have done. By making this claim, you mistakenly deny karma and its effects. Therefore, you are the supreme nihilists. Reply, we are not nihilists. We refute both the proposition of existence and the proposition of non-existence. We illuminate that path free from these two, the path that leads to the city of nirvana. We also do not claim karma, agents, effects, and so forth do not exist. What do we say? We posit that these lack intrinsic nature. Objection. There is still a defect in your position because it is not tenable for things that lack intrinsic nature to function. Reply. Again, there is no such defect because functionality is not a test in that which has intrinsic nature. Functionality is attested only in that which lacks intrinsic nature. The essentialist position is that the denial of intrinsic nature prevents karma from giving rise to effects. This is no different from the assertion by Tibetans who claim to be Madhyamikas that the arguments which refute intrinsic existence refute cause and effect. The Madhyamika and the essentialists agree that if one denies cause and effect, one becomes the most extreme sort of nihilist. However, the Madhyamika does not deny cause and effect, and still the essentialist calls the Madhyamika a nihilist or a nihilistic. Supposing that if you refute intrinsic existence, then you certainly must also refute cause and effect. Most Tibetans who claim to be Madhyamikas seem to argue with the essentialist assertion that if the argument refutes intrinsic nature, it must also refute cause and effect. Yet, unlike essentialists, those Tibetans seem pleased that reason refutes cause and effect, taking this to be the Madhyamaka system. Yeah, I kept going. Hello, Mambo. In answer to this objection, Chandrakirti responds, we are not nihilists. We eliminate the propositions of existence and non-existence. We illuminate the path to liberation. The rest of the passage shows how he avoids the positions of existence and non-existence by saying, we do not claim that karma and effects and so forth are non-existent. Chandrakirti avoids the nihilistic position. We would be nihilists if we asserted that cause and effect and so forth do not exist. But we do not assert this. In response to the question, well, what do you hold? Chandrakirti says, we posit or assert that these karma, effects, and so forth lack intrinsic nature. He thereby avoids the position of existence. This statement, there is still a defect in your position because it is not tenable for that which lacks intrinsic nature to function, indicates the essentialist objection. You Madhyamikas say, we do not propound non-existence, we propound an absence of intrinsic nature, but you still cannot escape the fallacy that we have already stated. Without intrinsic nature, cause and effect are not tenable. Those essentialists raise this objection because in their system there is no difference between the absence of intrinsic nature and non-existence. In reply, Chandrakirti says that functions such as causes giving rise to effects are impossible in the context of intrinsic existence, and yet are possible only in the absence of intrinsic intrinsic existence. Also, Chandrakirti's commentary on Aryadeva's 400 stanzas says, we are not proponents of non-existence, we are proponents of dependent arising. Are we proponents of real things? No, because we are proponents only of dependent arising. What do we propound? We propound dependent arising. What is the meaning of dependent arising? It means the absence of intrinsic existence. It means no intrinsically existent production. It means the arising of effects whose nature is similar to a magician's illusion, a mirage, a reflection, a phantom city, an emanation, or a dream. It means emptiness and selflessness. Chandrakirti shows that by asserting dependent arising, you can avoid the two extremes. The position that holds things exist and position that things do not exist. He avoids the position that things exist by explaining that dependent arising means no intrinsically existent production, and he avoids the position that things do not exist by indicating that dependent arising refers to the arising of effects like a magician's illusion. Therefore, thing may refer either to intrinsic existence or to the capacity to perform a function. Between these two, the thing in the essentialist position that things exist refers only to intrinsic existence. Thing in the position that things do not exist refers to that perform functions. For in avoiding these two extremes, Chandrakirti refutes intrinsic existence and indicates that there do exist causes and effects that are like a magician's illusion. Moreover, Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400 stanzas says, question, do you Madhyamikas claim that there are no memory consciousness that have as their objects the things of the past? Reply, who would claim that such do not exist? We do not eliminate dependent arising. The Master Aryadeva himself gives a precise statement of how memory exists. Therefore, the arising of what we call memory is only an unreal subject that is that has with an unreal object. Therefore, what memory observes is something in the past. If the past thing essentially existed, then the memory of it would be observing an object that essentially exists. Therefore, the memory would be essentially existent. By insofar as that past thing lacks intrinsic existence, the memory observing it also lacks intrinsic existence. Therefore, Aryadeva has established that the past object and the memory of it are unreal. Unreal means only lacking intrinsic existence and dependent arising. It does not mean the non-existence of things that can perform functions. A past thing is not entirely non-existent because it is an object of memory and its effects can be seen. It also does not essentially exist, for if it did, it would have to be permanent and it would have to be directly apprehensible. Let's see, where did we stop? Rinpoche, Chukawakasa? The Dang Drao. Okay, Dang Drao. I know where we are. Okay, that's good. 99. I just don't want to read too far. Okay. Where did I just stop? I'm sorry. Okay. Chandrakirti says that these past objects and such are not utterly non-existent and are also not essentially existent. He explains that unreal or fake means being a dependent arising. So unreal or fake means being a dependent arising and does not mean that things do not exist. Therefore, if you claim that these phenomena are essentially existent, then you are a proponent of real things. You have fallen to the extreme of intrinsic existence. However, to hold that these phenomena are simply existent does not make you a proponent of real things or a proponent of real existence. Similarly, if you hold that internal and external things are non-things, devoid of the capacity to perform functions, then you are propounding the non-existence of things, and you have fallen into the extreme of non-existence. However, if you do not fall to an extreme of non-existence by saying that things lack intrinsic existence. Some Tibetans who claim to be Madhyamikas do not distinguish utter non-existence from the absence of intrinsic existence, and do not distinguish essential existence from mere existence. They hope to avoid falling to the extremes of existence and non-existence by simply saying, we do not claim that things are non-existent. Mepa is the Tibetan for non-existent. We say that they are not existent. Yoba mepa, yimba.
We say that they are not existent. Yoba Mayimba. We do not claim that things exist, Yoba. We say that they are not non-existent, Mepa Mayimba. This is nothing but a mass of contradictions. It does not in the least explain the meaning of the middle way. For when they refute others, they perform the refutation via an investigation of whether or not something intrinsically exists. Therefore, they have to limit the possibilities to two: intrinsically exists or it does not. Yet, in making their own assertions, they claim there is something that is neither of these two. Why should they have to limit the possibilities to the two when they investigate something to see whether or not it intrinsically exists? Because if there were a third possibility beyond those two, it would not be reasonable to investigate the question: which is it? Intrinsically existent or not intrinsically existent? It would be as though there were a color and someone asked, is it blue or is it yellow? That's it. Okay, so we're going to end there. Whole lot of words. And we can do some questions. I think if someone's unsure if things are intrinsically existent at this point, I don't know. Or that they don't exist because they're not intrinsically existent. I think we've really gone through that.
I was just wondering, I wasn't quite sure how the word essentially existent was being used. Was that for
Just like
not
intrinsic. Essentially, it's
equals
another way to
intrinsic?
say that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go back to something from last week. It's on page 126 in the English.
Okay. Okay.
It's kind of talking about the same topic. About 3/4 of the way down. If you fail to limit the object in negation and overextend your refutation, then you lose confidence in the causal progression of dependent arising, thereby falling to a nihilistic extreme. This nihilistic view will lead you to a rebirth in a miserable realm.
Yeah.
So I struggle with this idea of the kind of the cosmic scorecard, that there's things, ideas, and actions that are going to definitively put you into one realm or another. Because it doesn't say it may lead you; it says it will lead you. So I guess two things. One, in the teachings of the Buddha, the original sutras, does he kind of expound on this? These levels explicitly and how you end up in one or another, and are they applied differently depending on where you are at in your development? So do beings of small capacity, medium capacity, and great capacity have different results from their actions? Because I remember you saying at one point that that bodhisattvas can't cut down a tree, like they have different criteria for where their actions.
A monk or a nun, a holder of the monk or nun's vow. Within there's abstinence from cutting a tree.
Okay, so is this only applying, because we're at beings of great capacity, so does this type of action apply only to someone at this level? Are there distinctions like that actions have different results based on your knowledge, or if someone that was taught this nihilistic view, but was a perfect, compassionate, generous person in every other regard, are they still going to a miserable rebirth because of this one concept?
Well, all of that compassion and wonderfulness is going to send them to all kinds of wonderful rebirths, and then that wrong view is going to send them to a bad rebirth, and they aren't connected.
So that one.
You know what I mean? You have to look at it in terms of you can literally create 1,000,000 lifetimes this lifetime.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It causes of 1,000,000 lifetimes.
Okay.
But that's what I say.
Okay.
So we're gonna
the second one.
I'll get to Rinpoche.
And then the different
right now.
levels having different impacts.
Absolutely. Rinpoche, I got to get him to the page. I'll just give him my book. Just give me 1 second. I'll find exactly where it is. Oh, I see. That's the Nipa. So it's right up here then. Rinpoche, the Lamrim Chenmo Nangla, the Lamatson Kappa Kelen, the Luta, Cheta Yuna, the Ngesung Drogere, Nesung, the Nyawa Dendru Yeda Drogere, then the Tanda Ngatsu Jipu Chembo, Lanji Rimba, Sacha. The Sacha de the Jipu Chembo. Then the Mekanga Chita Yuna Nesondro Jipu Chembi the Lobjong Sheken Luta Chana Nesondro. Mekanga Jipu Gutsusun. Then the Chitta Yuna, the Ngesun Dro Macha.
Chitta Yuna,
Yeah, Deepa Mashana, the Chitta Gidepo Ngesung. Juje. Deepa Mashana. The Juje Gecha Shena. The Chitta Yuna, Chitta the Ngesongi Ju. Okay. Okay. So no matter what level you're at, I explained to Rinpoche that now we're in the section for beings of great capacity, and is this advice being given to somebody who's already has this kind of pre-understanding and so forth, when it says that the wrong view, and specifically the wrong view of nihilism, will lead to lower realms. So Rinpoche said, from a cause and effect standpoint, yes, the cause of a cause of the lower realms of cyclic existence is nihilism, is a nihilistic view. If that hasn't been purified by acknowledgement of that downfall in some way or another, if it hasn't been purified, then it will necessarily lead to the lower realms of cyclic existence. Now, then the Chitta Sheta Chembo, the Dungyal Mo, Chitta Chung Chung, Rimbo Yerbe. So there are, though, if you have a very strong nihilistic view over and over again, that will lead to a much stronger result of lower realms, whatever that may mean, than if it was just a quick, small amount of that wrong view of nihilism. So in terms of result, the degree of result is concordant with the execution, the degree of execution, kind of like the small, medium, and great karma, and the results, the degrees, and the degrees and what those degrees give rise to. So it's similar to that, but certainly it's just from cause and effect. If you say what is a cause of the lower realms, you would say it is nihilism. And if you have nihilism, will you be led to the lower realms? Not necessarily. Why? Because it can be purified. But if the nihilism isn't purified, will that nihilism be a cause for lower realms? Yes. So that Rinpoche went through all of that. Does that answer it all? Cool. Don. DJ Don.
I have a difficulty in the two words emptiness and existence. So
Okay.
we exist. If we touch ourselves, we exist.
Yes.
Do we exist? And we also exist in the. I'm thinking of emptiness as a total field. We exist in emptiness.
Emptiness exists.
Yeah. So
We
So-
exist and
so-
emptiness exists.
but-
And we are empty and emptiness is empty.
Okay. So as we exist as a body, we exist.
Okay?
We can touch ourselves, but then when we die, that body won't be anymore. So we don't. But that body would still be in emptiness, or not. The body would be emptiness, but that sense of what was there will be in emptiness.
I think
It just the two words, emptiness.
emptiness just means that whatever the thing we're saying is empty dependently originates. That's all we're saying. That's why it's empty. It's only because it's a collection. It doesn't have some identity on its own.
Uh-huh.
It dependently originates. That's
Okay.
what makes it empty. So everything is empty.
It's empty. Okay.
Is empty, but and everything that exists is empty.
Okay.
Emptiness does not negate existence in any way. The two words, just take those two words and separate them completely,
Okay.
because they don't have anything to do with one another whatsoever. And the thing that gets confusing is when you do connect them and you think that emptiness means somehow not existing. It means that you don't exist in a way that you think you do.
Okay.
That's the thing about the existence part. You don't exist the way you think you do, but you do exist.
Okay.
And I don't mean you, Don. I mean
Right.
you as a
I know.
mass.
I'm
Most
talking
people
about everybody.
think
Yeah.
we exist kind of as a soul, as this singular being that will always be. Like I'm walking around, I don't feel like I'm going to disintegrate and then there'll be this future person that doesn't remember me. I think I'm this solid thing that really exists.
Okay.
So I make a lot of decisions based on that wrong idea that I'm really here. I'm this singular thing that isn't just a collection of things that came together. I'm looking at myself as something that's really separate and single, and that doesn't exist. That separate single thing.
Okay.
I'm here, but the way I think I'm here is incorrect.
Oh. Okay.
That's all.
That
The
makes
way
sense.
I think I'm here is wrong, but I'm here, but the way I think I'm here isn't correct.
And if we were here as not as a thought, but if we were here in emptiness.
You stop the
Yeah.
in emptiness stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're making it a place, and I think that's what confuses it.
Yeah.
It's not a place, it's not a field.
Quick-
It's merely a concept about everything.
Okay.
It's merely saying that everything is empty. Why is it empty? Because it's not intrinsically existent. It has parts that come together as a collection. And then that collection is a suitable basis to be named something. Like you put these things together, it'll roll down the road and drive. So it's suitably to be called a car. So then you name it a car. But there isn't a separate car that exists as intrinsically car. It takes all that stuff coming together.
Okay.
So we miss it. We look at
Yeah.
things as having and put qualities on them they don't have because we don't see this collection and all this stuff being put together. We see this final product as being this singular, substantially existent thing. And then we put labels. This is a Ferrari, so it's wonderful. This is a whatever, so it's not.
Yeah.
But we misapprehend it, and because we think it's not empty. We think it has these qualities. That's all. Rinpoche, kon tomba ni dang yoba. Sansan kon kali kapudu. Yoba mepa. Garshene tomba ni yene yoba. Tomba ni den mepa kon salodang. Den ye mumbo laso. Dendel yimbichir. Den mumbo laso. Luta yomari. Den ye tsampa selpochaso. Then Rinpoche, chu tamche the tombani garshene.
토마니 대변 나가서 나서야지 왔어. 나도 어때 뭐부터 초발을 뛰네 나서 근데 여러. 초발을 맞대비 나서 근데 말어. 초발을 맞대 나서 매장 어디 토마니에서 어떨라 그랬어.
So when we look at the eye, for instance, and we look at what is emptiness, it's merely the emptiness of the eye, the selflessness of the eye is that the eye that's here right now is a collection of things that have come together right now. Like if we take it away and just look at what's here right now, there are a collection of things that have come together, and then that collection is named as I, Jeff in this case. Jeff has been named. But there is no separate Jeff that is apart from that collection of things that came together and then were named. Jeff's emptiness is the fact that he came together like that and didn't arrive like that all whole. So Jeff's emptiness is that Jeff required all of these things coming together to occur. Jeff didn't just arrive as a singular thing all at once without any dependence.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
First, I want to thank you, Jeff, for interpreting, and then I wanted to ask Rinpoche how he's feeling.
Rinpoche, Cheranguzu Depien Be?
Do this.
Yes, I'm fine.
Thank you.
So I was just curious, if anything is permanent, which would mean, I guess, have intrinsic, so is complete Buddhahood considered a type of permanence, or is that?
Yes, so permanent things are empty also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Permanent things are also empty.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to think about that. Thank you very much.
Okay. The the tapa mi tapa kon sampa tapa tomba mayimba tomba yomare. Then nge lenja so yomare tapa dami tapa nicha tomba ni. Then okay. I just told him what I said, just in case I went crazy. Yeah, just going for a ride. Going for a little ego ride. Have no idea what you're saying, just going for it.
Scott's question.
Okay.
So you had a nihilistic view in a lifetime,
Okay.
and you come to the realization that that's an incorrect view.
Yes.
Is this where the role of antidotes come in?
Yes. That's
So
the
are
purification he was talking about,
So
the application.
and are there specific ones dependent upon
Okay.
the?
Rinpoche, the ngama konkichiwa, the luta yuna, luta the nesong ju, then the chiwa. Then chiran the dipa shana, dipa datudu. Then juje denden yomare gangin sena dipa datu. And kon chiwa, the dipa re, nepo re, yurbe. Deepa Kanga Nyepo Kakare? So there are both specific antidotes to apply, and then there are universal antidotes that you can apply.
So I remember, I think in Volume 2, we talked more about antidotes. It may have been in Volume 1.
Yeah.
So how do you know what the specific ones are?
Then the Deepa Sana, then they Nepo Shaguna, the Kandre Nepo Gari Yakshut Saladang. Becha Kabiarek, the Kandre Gutsogdu. Nepo Yakshu Kandre.
Shangju Sen Sandaris.
Yine the ngama chiran sumpre the Deepa Kashe Nepo re yure. Then the becha kabiare kandre hakogdu. The chikshina nge the busa seson. Then nge the Nepo dan tumo. Nepo tumo shagu. Then becha kabalo. Becha gabane. The Nepo data Nepo kabiare. So in the Lamrim Chenmo and other texts, you'll find specific ways of changing behavior, ways of acknowledging downfalls. He said, Rinpoche said, it's not coming to my mind right now, so I'm just translating at this point, where there are specific ways. But generally speaking, if meditation upon emptiness and the mind that aspires to enlightenment is the most powerful antidote to all negativities, because ultimately all negativities arise from misapprehension, misunderstanding. So meditation upon emptiness is the ultimate antidote to misunderstanding, and if it's coupled with bodhicitta, then it's a cause for Buddhahood. So it then becomes the greatest understanding of emptiness, which is the compassion which has the observationless as its object, or something like, remember the three types of great compassion, the one that observes emptiness, then it becomes the highest if it's coupled with bodhicitta. Tuchena Rinpoche. Seldu. And then the individual signs are in the Lamrim Chenmo too, that in some of the other texts, where how you know if a purification has taken place in dreams. So you'll also find that information in there. And also Rinpoche's given the teaching 1,000,000 times about the third dream state and so forth, and acknowledging it and seeing what's there. But yeah, so let's do it. Concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Thank you everybody for coming. I don't know where my book is. And just always remember, we'll keep Rinpoche in our prayers for his continued health and well-being, and also make aspirations that he follows the rules. Please. Maybe it'll help. Let's make aspirations. And also thank you again, Nima, for helping so much with Rinpoche. Tuchena Charan Rinpoche Roboche Du, and Sansan Kali Kabudu, Charan Kadran Chembo, Ngatsu Sheda Gagudu. And so I was saying that he's very kind, and it's hard sometimes to do what he has to do, and it's thankful. And it's difficult when you culturally have to understand that Rinpoche is like I don't want to say a god, because that's not the way that the religion is, but he's considered so famous and important that when Rinpoche is walking down the street, you'll see people just rush to the side of the road, and even sometimes get in ditches if you're in Drepung, some places. And so it's very hard for somebody to then come and take care of someone you've looked up to and see as almost like a god. And then you have to, enforce rules, and so it's very difficult. So I just want to say thank you, Genla, because it's very difficult job. Fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drakpa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well.
With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandok, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, the spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Geshe Rinpoche Gusi Shapi Denana. Memba Lapja Kanga.